My name is Richard Sauber. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today. And when I asked him to send me a resume, this is what I got from Dr. Lorandos. Let's see. So this is the kind of introduction that he wanted to be very brief in terms of the comments. So in light of being brief, I thought I'd say a few things about Dr. Lorandos. It starts off by saying, I'm a member of Mensa. And then after that, we have to acknowledge Dr. Lorandos is a licensed clinical, he's a licensed and clinical forensic psychologist who became frustrated in the limited role of a psychologist and went back to law school, where he now practices as an attorney, but still has the benefit of all of his acquired knowledge and experience as a psychologist. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lorandos.
I'm going to talk about when parental alienation syndrome, parental alienation disorder, parental alienation poop-poop-a-doop, I don't care what you call it, when it becomes criminal. And I'm going to talk about how processes of parental alienation done by a parent, done by the associates of a parent, can lead to devastating criminal charges. And I'm going to talk about it multimedia.
The kindergarten teacher falsely accused and acquitted of sexually molesting 3 little girls. Tanya Kraft joins us. An unlikely suspect falsely accused of heinous crimes. Her own daughter testified against her. All next on Larry King Live.
There we go. The point of this little presentation is that parental alienation often can lead to horrendous criminal charges. And this is the case that I'm going to talk about. Whoa. Yeah, this is the case I'm going to talk about.
One of the 3 children who testified against her was her own daughter. She lost custody of her 2 children and is now still fighting to get them back. Tanya Kraft is here with us tonight in our studios. So is Dr. Demosthenes Lorandos. He is Tanya Kraft's attorney.
Okay. Something that I would like you to ask yourselves is, how many times would any parent want to answer this question?
How do you emotionally handle this? Your own daughter.
How many times would any parent want to answer?
Of those 3 little girls, one of them was your daughter. Your daughter testified for the prosecution against you, and I think that led a lot of people to believe, well, if her own daughter says she's involved in this kind of behavior, she must be.
How many of us want to answer a question like this again and again?
A mom's point of view, an emotional point of view, to witness your daughter on that stand. Now, you haven't seen her in 712 days, except for the time you've seen her in the courthouse. What was that like for you?
That was the absolute hardest thing that I've ever experienced.
And once again, would any of you like to answer this question?
Among those accusing you, your own daughter, and to hear her in court saying the things that she said, how do you get past that?
Well, I think you get past it as a mother, that you unconditionally love your child. You realize, I have seen with all the evidence that we have seen and the progression of what happened, that it's she either has memories falsely that have been implanted or she's been manipulated, but it's not her fault. And I don't blame her or any of the children, because they're a victim as much as I am.
So what did they actually, the buttons have changed on me. What did the alienators, particularly the father of her own daughter, what did the alienators get the kids to say?
Basically, the story was that there were children at my home, and when they were at my home, they were given baths, and inappropriate touching happened during bath time.
When parental alienation syndrome becomes criminal, there are always two people at least acting. One is an alienating parent, and the other is a therapist. Without the therapist, the claims really don't go very far. Okay, this has been going on over and over and over and over again. In cases like the Wenatchee cases, started with parents. The Kern County cases started with parents and people angry at parents and grandparents and so on. The McMartin. Why does this keep happening? Is there science that can help?
I have to ask you this. I mean, have we learned nothing since the McMartin trial? The McMartin trial was something that happened in California years and years ago, where nursery school teachers, it was a family, the McMartin family, was accused of molesting and doing all this satanic stuff with these kids, and they'd shut down the school, it ruined them, and only to discover, several years later that it was all a lie. Mm-hmm. So how come we haven't learned anything? Wow.
Don't you want to just slap them upside the head when this stuff happens? We've learned a lot. Scientists like me have learned a lot, but try to convince the lawyers. If you're not an NACDL lawyer, a National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, well-trained lawyer, you don't get it. So it doesn't get explained to juries, but we know a lot as scientists.
Okay, if we know a lot as scientists, one of the things you need to do with accused parents is make them do their research. Make them read the research. In this case, this client did her research.
I had throughout, with these allegations, I was very proactive and I researched. I actually had come to California at one time and met with John Van de Kamp, which is the former Attorney General, because he had handled the Bakersfield case.
This client read about how kids can be manipulated into saying things and went looking for scientists that could come and testify in her case about why her daughter would say these things, why other little girls would be manipulated into saying these things. She did her research.
Whenever I began my search for the truth, I began to find the experts that could answer that question, because that's what kept me awake at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, how can this happen? How can you go from doing absolutely nothing to it being twisted into something so heinous?
Yeah. How can you go from doing absolutely nothing to having it twisted into something so heinous? And how can you go from doing absolutely nothing and having a creepy ex out there to looking at 480 plus years and 22 counts of child sexual assault felonies? Well, how do you save yourself from something like this? Does scientific research illustrate how parents impact on children? Not just people saying, yes, they have an impact on children. Yes, they alter children's memories. No. When your life's on the line, when you're looking at 480 years, when you are going to go away forever or be killed, for goodness sakes, It takes more than somebody that's just going to come in and say as an expert, yes, I've testified 23 times in this Podunk County, and it's based on my expertise, I would say that parents can impact children's memories. Not good enough. So let's look at how science can be used. Actual experimental research science can be used to tell the story to a jury and to set up, create a foundation for the experts that will come in and testify for the accused parent. You see, because Dr. Campbell and I teach cross-examination. We write a 2-volume set on cross-examination for the biggest law publisher on the planet. Every year we update it, and we are constantly, Dr. Campbell, every single year goes through every bit of behavioral science literature that impacts on cases like this, pulls every single bit of new research into every update, and I look at all the law from all over the country, and we are constantly telling families, clients, lawyers, forensic psychologists, and psychiatrists, you must give the jury the tools, give the judge the tools, the conceptual tools, actual tools from research to make a good or a better decision. Now, in this case, we had a jury from a jury pool in one of the poorest communities, a jury pool where we drew people onto the jury who hadn't finished 8th grade, where they're still fighting the war between the states. Literally, where one of the main people on this jury was a lady who was so poor she could not afford teeth. And that was a person who was going to decide the life of that woman that you just saw, based on a parentally alienated, developed allegation and what the other people had done. And I'm going to talk about what the parent did, and I'm going to talk about what the therapist did. But first of all, let's quickly go through some of the science research, just a teeny bit that we use to set up experts of the quality of Dr. Burnett, Nancy Aldrich, Professor Hazard, Professor Feynman from Emory University, for this case in Georgia. There's a bunch of good research out there. For example, if we, and I'm going to go through this quickly, any of you that want this stuff can get it from me. All you need to do is send me an email. I know my office manager is going to hate me for saying that, but I'm going to go through this quickly. Frick, Silverhorn, and Evans research study. They looked at 95 kids, right, referred to clinic for anxiety. If their parents said, yeah, you're anxious, and the kid said, yeah, I'm anxious, they had endorsement of many more symptoms. Dr. Campbell has a wonderful ability to take disparate research, sort of put it together, take it out of a cornucopia of journals, put it all together, and he comes up with ideas like this. If you look at Siegel, Waters, and Dinwiddie, the conversational habits of children cause them to misinterpret events when they are, I don't know why that's happening, but it is. And that's on the guys in the booth, because it looks great here. Causes them to misinterpret events. Siegel, Waters, and Dinwiddie also demonstrated that children use a switching strategy. And all these sites are available for me. Use a switching strategy when they're repeatedly questioned. Dr. Campbell points out that children will misinterpret what they're told. And children are skilled in knowing what it is the gist of the conversation is about, says this research. And so if they're constantly being harangued and harassed about somebody, they'll get on board with it. Now, another thing that's interesting that Campbell points out is that when you've got anxious parents, they're going to misinterpret what they hear. So instead of saying, oh, okay, Emma, the doctor checked Emma's growth. Okay, so she's 36 inches, not 38 inches. Okay, she didn't. But the anxious parent's going to hear, oh my God, she's got a tumor. Okay, so the anxious parent, even a benign parent, says this research, is going to hear things according to their fear. Okay, even benign parents, even parents that don't want to do terrible things, can't keep the story straight. How do we know? Well, because Brooke, Cece, Frankauer, said that they're very concerned about the hearsay testimony that comes in from parents because of the way in which they manipulate and change or don't understand what they're doing in their conversations with their children. In their research, they pointed out that mothers had a very hard time remembering, a very difficult time remembering whether specific things that were said were statements that they made or the kid made. They also point out similar things to what my colleague Debbie Poole did. Now, in Michigan, at this little university in the middle of Michigan, in a place called Mount Pleasant, Debbie Poole has done some stellar research. One of the best studies ever done to demonstrate parental impact on children's recollection of events are the Mr. Science experiments. If you don't know these, don't go to court, because you will not be able to explain, you won't have some of the best armamentarium you could have. Now, in the Mr. Science experiments, a guy came to class, did a little Mr. Science thing, and 3 weeks later, a book was sent home for the parents to read to the kids about what Mr. Science did. And the researchers noted that the interaction with parents can be an extreme contaminant of the children's memories. You see, because in the storybook, the little kids that the parents were going to read to the kids, the story talked about 2 experiments with the kids that the kids had witnessed and 2 experiments that the kids hadn't witnessed, that hadn't happened, and a non-experienced event about something yucky. And you know what? Gee whiz, after the parents talked to the kid, read the story to the kids started having memories about the non-experienced events. Okay? They pointed out that children who are involved in forensic investigations have talked to their parents before. If you don't know this study, don't go to court. Then they replicated the study again 6 years later. And they say in their analysis of the study, they say 3 to 4-year-olds were poor at differentiating between experienced and non-experienced events that had recently been discussed with their parents. They pointed out that 7 and 8-year-olds had similar difficulties. Okay, well, in the expansion of the Mr. Science study, Debbie and Lindsay used 114 kids this time. And they were able to demonstrate that kids would have memories about fictitious touching events. They point out that the contamination of even benign parents can be extreme on what children remember. So, Ricci, Beal, and Deckel demonstrated that kids respond to the implicit demand characteristics of the situation. I love that phrase. When I'm an expert witness, I love to explain the implicit demand characteristics of the situation. Why? Because if the kid has been talked to a zillion times about what a creep mom is, when you start talking to her about the subject of mom, what are the implicit demand characteristics of that interaction? Mom's a creep. Okay. Well, Ricci, Beal, and Deckel demonstrated that we must attend to the demand characteristics of the situation. They did an interesting experiment. I'm sorry that the cards are going off to the side of the screen, but we'll wait till William gets back in the booth. Basically what they did was they showed these little kids a slideshow of a theft event. And then they had a 4x. They had the kid was interviewed by the parent where the target, the person that did the theft, was present in the lineup or not present. And then the kid was interviewed by a stranger where the target, the person that did the theft, was there or not there. And they point out that the children changed their minds frequently when they were suggested by their parents. That the children, even though the parents were given a typed list of questions, the children responded to suggestive questions like, how about the dog? What kind of dog was it at the picnic? There wasn't a dog, and they're talking about the dog. So they point out their results revealed that children interviewed by their parents had less accurate recall. Okay. They point out as well that children made more errors, and alienated parents are going to love this, made more errors in the target absent lineups. In other words, the perpetrator wasn't there. They made more errors when the person wasn't even there in the lineup to talk about. Okay. They also point out that children, in their analysis of how the children interacted, that the children interpret the "are you sure? Did you get it right?" as a cue that they didn't answer correctly to the demand characteristics of the situation, so they change their answers. Now, we know that we get forensic psychologists or psychiatrists come on the stand and say that, but I'm telling you, you better have the research study in your hand and be able to understand it so that you can stand up to cross-examination, and so you've really got something to waive. Okay, so that's a quick run-through, just a few examples of actual in the laboratory research material that demonstrates the things that we all know happen, but the fact that we all know it happened isn't cutting it. We've got now research demonstration that these things occur and can be replicated repeatedly. And so, how did the alienating parent behave in this case? What did the charming alienating parent do?
What kind of story? Why would they make up a story like that?
And there was an ex-husband that was not a good relationship. And the children, when they were being questioned and asked by their parents about some child-on-child, just normal touching, pointing things, my name was brought into it by the parents, not by the children. The children did not spontaneously say my name. The parents questioned over and over and over and then interjected my name into the situation, and it was just adopted by the children.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, her ex-husband, what a guy. There were no prior filings for custody before her arrest on charges that had put her in prison for 480 years. He didn't express any concern about the mother to any teachers, the school personnel. He expressed no concern about her as a custodial parent at all. In fact, he saw her and talked about seeing her at the ball field. He was at her house for Thanksgiving the year before. Everything was okay. But after one telephone call, he said, from a mother of the other complaining witness, he had a fatherly intuition. What a guy. Gee, how about those hundreds of minutes of phone calls that you were trying with the other accusing parents that you were lying by omission about, that you were trying to conceal? Oh, it was a fatherly intuition? Thanks a lot. Well, so he asked the child on the day social services and the cops grabbed her, "Hey, anybody touch you on your privates today?" Oh, yeah, that's a great question to ask your little 6-year-old when she's just been pulled out of her mother's house where she's lived for years. And then he admits that, he put medicine on her bottom. I got a card out of order. That he put medicine on her bottom. Mama put medicine on her bottom. And he never talked, and he also admitted that he never talked to the mom about anything. However, when the girl was first interviewed, the very first time this little girl was interviewed, she said, "My daddy told me Mommy lied to the police. My daddy told me she lied to a lot of people." Gee, that's funny. He never talked to the mom about anything, but all of a sudden, the mommy lied about this, and the mommy lied about that. Curiously, no authorities ever asked this guy what he said to the daughter when they were interviewing her subsequent.
Now, why again would your daughter testify against you?
Well, I don't really know. She's at the age, I assume she does what she's told to do. And she actually didn't testify against me. I mean, she got on the stand and basically, talked about medication. So it was very, it was very hard for me to understand why she was put through what she was put through.
Okay, so the prosecution and the other alienating parents and this parent apparently cooked up this alienation scheme and got everybody involved. And when the little girl that was this client's daughter got on the stand. She refused to look at her mother, wouldn't make any eye contact. All the kids seemed to have been coached that everything was horrible, and the big bad Dr. Lorandos was going to cross-examine them. So in 10, 11 minutes into each cross-examination, they were giggling with me. Now, look up La Belle Indifférence in the DSM, where affect and description of trauma aren't at all connected. Oh, yeah, and then he just stuck a broom handle in my butt. So the affect and the story were demonstrated in the cross-examination to the jury as being disconnected. But what kind of influence did this guy have? And what did he try to do when he got on the stand? Well, he just remembered, this alienating parent, just remembered on the way to court that in 1998, before he and the client, Tanya, got married, she bought porno, girl-on-girl porno. The three accusers were girls. Yeah, girl-on-girl porno, okay. And he said, oh yeah, and she would go out with J.S. And yeah, one night she said she was drugged and stayed up with J.S. and woke up in her bed. And what else did this charming guy say? Everything he possibly could. But he didn't put those allegations in a divorce filing in 2004, didn't mention it in his affidavit for custody, didn't mention any of these allegations in 8 hours and 222 pages of deposition, didn't mention them to the detectives, didn't mention them to the social services personnel, didn't mention them to the court-appointed custody evaluator, just remembered them on the way to court. Sound familiar? Sound like an alienating parent? Okay. So, the child says that mommy put medicine on her. What did this guy do when he came to court? After trying to sabotage her in any way he possibly could, he actually stood up in front of the jury and said, "Mommy put medicine like this." We had a very good criminal defense lawyer named Kerry King from Atlanta on the team. We call him the Hawk. He's a retired lieutenant colonel from Vietnam era. And it was all we could do to keep the Hawk from jumping across the table and grabbing this guy. So this is a charming thing that the alienating parent did after all of those phone calls. Now, therapists can impact on children's memory for events. Let's talk about therapists, because remember, there's always a parent when it gets criminal and a therapist. Has to be a therapist. Without a therapist, they're not going to file charges. Without a therapist, social services aren't going to take the kids away. Okay, well, therapists can have a tremendous impact upon these little kids caught up in this dilemma. Cece and Brooke wrote a great book quite a while ago called Jeopardy in the Courtroom, and there's lots of wonderful quotes in it, like this one from the Little Rascals trial. No attempt to help the child with their reality testing. What does that mean? Well, that means, could it possibly really have happened? Can you remember what you got for your birthday that year? Can you remember what you got for Christmas that year? What's your ability to remember any darn thing? Where do you think you first heard that idea? Reality testing. So, in therapy with some of these goofy therapists, implausible things, ridiculous things are accepted at face value. Another quote from Jeopardy in the Courtroom: because there are other adults that are listening and buying into the story, those are memory-altering artifacts. Particularly when they're on the bandwagon, when they believe these things. Rumor formation is another important area of research to look at, how people get stereotyped. Something else about therapists. Therapeutic techniques that may be good down the line should not be used before trial or before custody determination, because they skew the kid's memory for events and they don't have reality-based memories. So how many times do we see therapists coming in saying, I'm giving therapy for sexual abuse? Wait a minute. Sexual abuse is an event, not a diagnosis. When you get hit by a bus, you don't go into the orthopedic clinic and say, okay, pull up the chart. What's this guy's diagnosis? Bus hit. No. It's broken femur, trauma to the right hip, etc. Okay. We also know that when we study how therapists work, that the best way to deal with kids in these situations is to deal with coping strategies for day-to-day experiences. Those day-to-day experiences that if they have them, they've been sexually abused, but if they don't have them, they've been sexually abused. Okay. Here's a question. Here's a question that faces every lawyer in these terrible situations, which is why most lawyers, frankly, in these situations across the country, bleed them and plead them. They take as much money as they can get, and then they tell them it's overwhelming, you better enter a plea. But I didn't do it, sorry. How are you going to defend yourself? Well, I gave you all my money. Well, there you go. Better plead. So, what is the $64,000, the $1 million the question? Well, here it is.
How did you win this, having her own daughter testify against her?
Yeah. How do you do that? Well, you distill the research. You go through thousands of pages of clinical research from psychiatry, social work, psychology. You go through thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of research. Look for what fits the facts of your case. Then you use it in cross-examination. For example, see this book, Jeopardy in the Courtroom? Tell me what Cece and Brooke had to say about parental impact on children's memories. You don't know that one? Okay. Goldilocks, Dr. Campbell. Because in that text, Dr. Campbell talks about all sorts of terrible actual cases of false sexual abuse from parental alienation contexts. So you flash them over and over and over again, knowing full well that when you get your turn, you get somebody like Bill up on the stand. Now, Bill is from Vanderbilt. They refer to Vanderbilt in Tennessee as the Harvard of the South. So, meeting at a cosmopolitan restaurant for dinner the night before he's to go on the stand, Dr. Burnett and I are trying to figure out, okay, you've read all the stuff. Yeah, all right. Now, how are we going to, I'm telling you who's on the jury, how are we going to deal with the fact that you're at the Harvard of the South and we're in this little teeny podunk community? And even worse than that, how are we going to tell them that you came from the Harvard of the North? And so we talked about it, and the very first question that Dr. Burnett got asked when he got put on the stand in front of this jury in this terrible case that was by now national news was, Harvard, huh? Are they snooty? To which he responds, somewhat snooty. And the ice was broken, and off we went. And this is a very small example of the distillation of the research.
Well, I think that by that point, the children had really come to believe these things. In other words, the children, having had conversations with parents, with inept interviewers, with an inept therapist, have come to believe that Ms. Kraft has done certain things to them, that she's evil. One child actually referred to her as the evil one.
Dr. Burnett was most critical because no one explored what the children and their parents were discussing. So no one considered the possibility that the girls' stories may not be real. He was also harsh about the therapy the girls received as a result.
The problem with this is that if we have the situation where this little child wasn't abused, and that she simply has come to have these false memories or false beliefs that it happened, this kind of therapy is horrible.
Defense attorney Dr. Demosthenes Lorandos also used Dr. Burnett's expertise to debunk the state's attack on Kraft's character, asking if flirting with men, drinking, wearing a bikini, or being a fitness instructor correlate with being a child molester.
I don't think so, because as far as I know, there's no relationship between those two things. And if anything, if you have that idea, you're mistaken, and so you then set about to try to prove your mistaken notion.
Okay. Every one of those things that came out of Dr. Burnett's mouth came from a research study that he had done, or other presenters that you've heard and will hear from have done, or some of the other people that I've talked about. And he had them highlighted, he had the relevant pages dog-eared, ready to go from his stuff, from whatever stuff, so that if by any chance the prosecution had read a book on cross-examining experts in the behavioral sciences and wanted to try to hold his feet to the fire, he had it there. How many experts are that prepared? 480 years? Not prepared? 480 years? What do you think? It's important that you use the research for cross-examination to show that the other side doesn't know what they're talking about and have nothing to back it up. Well, I remember a study by Sorensen and Snow that, So you then use those same studies out of your own expert, and you get stuff like that from Dr. Burnett. Well, you know, the state, when they grab kids in these situations, insist that the victims be in therapy with social workers, and in this case, Lori Evans. It's important, extremely important, to find out who are these people? Really, who are they? We had another lawyer on the team named Clancy Covert from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Clancy was dogged in his pursuit of who are these people. And Clancy discovered that Miss Evans, the therapist, had been in the same court in Chattanooga the previous year trying to get a divorce. And when she was trying to get a divorce, she had some very interesting things to say. So why do we look at these therapists? Why do we go right? Why do I look at these therapists? Why did I quit being a forensic psychologist full-time and go to law school? Because I wanted to ask these bozos the question. Why did I want to ask them my questions?
Doing this to little girls has to stop. Creating false memories in little girls and little boys' minds has to stop.
That's why. So, we found out when we took her deposition, say, excuse me, but, all right, forgive me for this question, but it's one of the standard ones that we ask everyone. It didn't get asked last time. Have you ever been treated for any mental illness or psychological disorder? No. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Just a second here, Miss Therapist. When we asked that question, we knew that she had just been in the very same courthouse in front of the very same judge that Our client was fighting out custody the year before. And when she filed her divorce, she wanted her physicist, soon-to-be ex-husband, to pay her lots of money because he was such a brute and a creep and he beat her and it was horrible. And in order to make this complaint, by the way, numerous witnesses came and said none of that happened. Nothing like that happened. Well, in order to make her claim, she went and saw a licensed psychologist who wrote treatment records, and she brought her treatment records and she entered them into evidence in her divorce case, and she quoted from them from the stand, and she put the psychologist on the stand. And when we said, all right, have you ever been treated for any mental illness or psychological disorder? And she said, no. We said, I said more than that, but... Now, this deposition occurred just months after she was asking for huge cash from the guy, and in the treatment records about her, she was assessed as having a global assessment of functioning of 35. Gee. Okay. Now, I'm glad that Dr. Campbell was not here this morning to hear that wonderful introduction of Dr. Burnett, because it was something that was said about the DSM that I'm sure Dr. Campbell, being a former nationally ranked hockey player, would have checked him into the boards about. The reliability over time of diagnoses like global assessment of functioning is... Anyway, I wasn't saying that at this point. I just wanted to demonstrate that, oh, it's 35? Great. Well, I love that. So, one of the fun things about this was that in this particular case, we knew going in. Remember this. We knew going in. Somehow they asked me to lead the trial team. So, okay, I came down from our Michigan office and led the trial team. And I told these two Georgia lawyers and this Tennessee lawyer, plan on losing every single objection. Plan on losing every single pretrial motion. Plan on getting your hat handed to you. To which the Atlanta lawyer said, well, we know they're going to home cook us, but Doc, come on. I said, no. Plan on losing everything. Plan on losing absolutely every objection. We're only speaking to the court above him. We're going to get ED. And so that's exactly what happened. We had certified copies of records admitted into evidence, certified by the court clerk from a court of jurisdiction just 20 minutes away. And the trial judge in this case, where she's looking at 480 years, and the prosecutors said, oh no, they're privileged. You can't admit them. Oh no, you can't. And so I had to go. It was excruciatingly difficult to get any of this stuff before the jury. But I'm a Greek. We're wily, if not anything else. And so the jury found out about this. They found out about this through Dr. Burnett, through Dr. Aldrich, who was a fabulous expert, Nancy Aldrich in Atlanta. I would suggest to anybody in these situations to look her up. We got a lot of this stuff into evidence, even though they tried to block us. And one of the things was she suffered great emotional stress for the past year, and her doctor testified that she would need additional treatment. Those were her own words in her own filing to the court, which they blocked us from getting into evidence. We knew they would. Well, the doctor's treatment notes for this therapist indicated that she had had numerous difficulties, and when the physicists, when the licensed, board-certified medical physicists, 5-year-old daughter climbs into bed with them because she's afraid of a thunderstorm, our therapist calls his ex-wife and says, you better have her looked at because he may have infected her, and then I'm going to call CPS on you. That's in the court record. Wow, what a kid. Boy, she's the right person to do therapy. Now, paraphrasing some of the things in this woman's treatment records, she's purchased a handgun. Aye! And obtained a certificate to carry it concealed. She's complained of people violating her boundaries. She had a bad scare this week. She thought somebody unscrewed the light bulb in her apartment building. And she's, worried about this contact that might have infected. And, she's treating all 3 of the alleged victims. Okay, and what did the doctor say in his treatment record 1 year to the day before she began treating the 3 alleged victims? In my case, she's not coping. So, social workers, is your board worth anything? Okay. So, she was fun.
Evans was originally listed as a state's witness, but they have not called her to the stand.
So today the defense called her as a witness.
Hey. Oh, you mean the prosecution wouldn't call her to the stand? Yeah. So, I had to call her. I couldn't ask her any leading questions. I had to ask her, and imagine walking around in the court with her papers, her treatment records, and trying to cross-examine her.
So today the defense called her as a witness in hopes of uncovering incompetence and possibly even a payoff. Team coverage begins with Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Melidia Kluel in Ringo.
Well, David, defense attorney Dr. Demosthenes Lorandos had a very difficult day this afternoon during a break. He was searching the courthouse for aspirin. He spent the day questioning Laurie Evans. She is, as you mentioned, a defense witness, but clearly she did not want to answer the defense questions.
I mean, is there something wrong with your memory?
We had a phone call.
Hold it. Is there something wrong with your memory?
No, we didn't discuss the children. Is that what you're asking me?
No, I'm asking you about your memory of how this happened. Is there, have you ever had problems with your memory?
No.
In Kraft's custody case in Hamilton County, Judge Marie Williams found Evans not credible, in part because she lied about her own mental illness.
Whose records?
Appears to be Dr. Salve's.
About who?
I'm assuming this is about me. I don't see my name on it.
You're assuming?
I don't see my name on this.
Weren't you there?
When we teach cross-examination, one of the things that we teach is that it's easy to be Attila the Hun. It's much harder to be Detective Columbo. What? Weren't you there? Okay, so when we gave the deposition to the judge in Tennessee, where they actually have better judges to read, and the treatment file, the judge read them and said, oh, wait a minute. With respect to Tanya's custody case and what's happening with her children, I have jurisdiction, and I don't want this lady coming anywhere near them. She's not competent, and her diagnoses don't fit her treatment file. So, let's see. She's also licensed in Tennessee as a social worker. I like social workers. Social workers take on the most horrible cases. Is the Tennessee Board of Social Work any good? Are they worth anything? Hello? So after the judge entered this order, this therapist said, wait a minute. I've got to file to intervene in the custody case because I don't want this order that I'm not credible circulating around. What's it going to do to my practice? And when they filed the motion, the therapist's attorney argued that her client, the social worker's very credibility was at stake, and that a guilty verdict for Tanya would validate that the social worker was right all along. So the judge in Tennessee, who is really smart, said, wait a minute. If she's found guilty over in Tennessee, your client's validated after I said that she was not credible. Does this sound like a conflict to you? Well, when the therapist filed her motion to intervene, to get into the custody case, she had to write an affidavit. And she said in the affidavit, I wasn't given notice that the judge said that I was not credible and that I shouldn't see the kids anymore. And she swore to that in her affidavit. She swore to that. Signed, sworn, stamped, filed with the court. But wait. The judge's order giving notice that you were fired, that you shouldn't be doing it anymore, was handed to her in court, and stamped and marked and admitted as an exhibit. So when she swore, I was not given notice of the motion that was heard on December 15, 2008, is that perjury? Then, in her affidavit, she said, after the entry of this order that said I wasn't competent and not credible, I only learned of its existence when I was presented with it in another case, when I was testifying to children. Wait a second. Wait a second. What do you mean you only learned of its existence when you were testifying in another case? The day it was entered, is this your handwriting? Is this your treatment note? Is this where you write, client's father left message that Judge Williams made order not to continue as therapist? Is that your handwriting? Oh, so the affidavit. Is that perjury? So, what about this financial interest in the outcome? I am fearful that the December 30th order will be used against me in other cases. Oh, yeah. So when the judge gets this and takes them all back into chambers, the attorney that's representing the therapist says her pecuniary interest, that's legal talk, meaning her cash motivation, related to her practice and not being found credible, sometimes we lawyers torture the English language, is of utmost importance to her. Yes, not being found credible is of utmost importance. Yep, you don't get a lot of cash when you're not credible, unless you're on Fox News. So the attorney says in chambers, well, let me just show you how this would work, Judge. If Miss Evans testified that, in the child's words, that her mother digitally penetrated her vagina, I would say to the expert, well, Dr. So-and-so, do you think that Lori Evans was right? What she said was valid? And then they would say, oh, yeah, it was valid, so my client would be vindicated, and then you'd have to rescind your order that she was not credible. The judge, being smart, said, I don't think so. Get out of here. So, how did this therapist behave in this case? The day the child is taken from her mother, she leaves a message as she's being carted away to her daddy's house. Mommy, I love you, but I won't be seeing you for a very long time. We had that voicemail message amplified, washed, HD'd, so we could get it exactly right. Day 0. Mommy, I love you. But I won't be seeing you for a very long time. Okay, good old therapist. Hey, Lori. 4 days with Lori. Mother's lying. 20 days with Lori. Doesn't want to see her mother. 27 days with Lori. Doesn't miss her mother. 33 days with Lori. No longer wishes to see her mother. 73 days with Lori. The child wouldn't want to see her or talk to her. She's fearful. 80 days with Lori. Doesn't want to live with her mother. 95 days with Lori. Glad not to be living with mother. She hasn't seen her or spoken to her at all. This has nothing to do with her mother. Hello? 101 days with Lori. She doesn't want to live with her mother or ever return to her care. 140 days with Lori. Fearful to even discuss mother with the therapist. 165 days with Lori. Never wants to see mother again because of what she did. 187 days with Lori. She's very scared. That's what this therapist did. That's what therapists can do. And remember, when Meredith Vieira interviewed Tanya Kraft on the Today Show, she hadn't seen her daughter in over 700 days. Hadn't spoken to her, hadn't written to her, had no contact, while good old Lori and the other therapists were whipping her up. Okay. So, cheating, phony evidence, creation of false and fraudulent and false documents, losing every evidentiary call, up against an incredible prosecution team that wanted nothing but to kill her after 22 counts of not guilty.
Good evening. Tanya Kraft's attorneys have begun the process of reuniting her with her children now that she's been acquitted of all 22 counts.
So many of you are wanting to know how this portion of the story ends, but you could say the story is really just beginning. No one from the circuit is talking tonight, despite the fact they are public servants, some elected officials, and they're all paid by taxpayers. Many residents told Eyewitness News they wanted an explanation because their money was used to launch the case against Tanya Kraft.
Lois Spence followed the Tanya Kraft trial closely and feels while the jury got it right, the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit did not.
A judge is supposed to be impartial, and I didn't feel like he was impartial.
Spence isn't the only one who believes Tanya Kraft did not receive a fair trial.
If we're wrong, we're stupid. But if we're right, it's a state and a federal crime. So yes, the FBI is involved. Yes, the U.S. Attorney's Office is involved. I have an ethical responsibility to report things like this. And I did.
Dr. Demosthenes Lorandos says his client was the victim of incompetent child interviewers, inept investigators, and fraudulent evidence. For that reason, he's contacted the FBI.
I'm a lawyer connected with the NACDL, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And we're not going to let some local judge back us down. We're not going to let some local cop create what appears to be fraudulent evidence. No, I don't think so.
Thank you very much.